Oh god, there's another one of these. Stop Killing Games 2. This is the second one.
Hi, my name is Jason Thorhall, also known as Pirate Suffer, and the other day I put out a video called Stop Killing Games, saying why I would not support the initiative. Overall, it was actually quite positive. The analytics on it show that people really think it's a good idea. There's a huge amount of like ratio, and I received hundreds of comments from developers thanking me for putting it out because they can't speak publicly while they're at a business or a job elsewhere. A lot of the times, major companies will fire you if you are speaking out of turn and cause a PR disaster for those companies.
Yes,
and since this is such a popular thing among players, most devs aren't going to say anything to you. So I am. So let's discuss the most common requirement of the initiative, which is games have to be left in a functional, playable state.
Okay.
Now, what happens if that game is a online-only live service game? Well, if you want that to stay in a functional, playable state, that means the devs have to release either server binaries or somehow carve off the game to be a single-player experience now. Some way to keep it functional and playable, right? Now, many of you are requesting, yes, I should get the server binaries so that I can go and make private servers for this. But that doesn't make a lot of sense in the real world. And the reason why is because it leaves developers open to abuse. So let's explore that a little bit. Let's say that you made your own video game, and you made a live service game. Maybe it's an MMO, maybe it's something else, right? And let's say that I want to monetize that game, but you don't allow monetization of the game by any other party. This makes sense because most creators don't allow for that. You can't just take someone else's art and profit off of it. Normal, right? So then I go, well, how am I going to force you to do this? Under this initiative, you would have to release the server binaries or keep the game in a functional, playable state.
I don't really know about server binaries or anything like that. Like, for example, I think this is kind of not really what a lot of people wanted. I know for me, I don't think that a developer should have to give anything away. Yeah, that's my perspective. Yeah, absolutely not. No, yeah, who said that? Yeah, who cares about private server? No, I'm just saying, like, the server binary. Yeah, I don't think anybody wanted that. Then how are people going to do anything? The same way they do things for games that are pirated now. They recreate it in some way or another, and then they put it out there. That's the same reason. Illegally? Yeah. Yeah, if it's recreated, I don't think you should have to give it out, but if it's recreated, then that's fine. Absolutely. Yeah, no, you shouldn't. Yeah, but if you want to recreate it, go ahead. Recreation is not illegal. It absolutely is. Of course it is. What are we talking about? Yeah, that's illegal. I know, but that's the problem. Yeah, that's the issue.
At end of life. So I hit you with a ton of bots. I hit you with a ton of exploits. I attack your community. I destroy your Reddit. I go after your business. I go everywhere that I possibly can to make this cost as much as it possibly can for you. And it's not hard to do this. We saw the exact same thing happen in TF2 recently. The massive amount of bots that were attacking the game. This is not infeasible. This is something...
Well, to be fair, the TF2 downvoting and everything was because the players were upset about the bots. It wasn't that the bots were downvoting the game. It was the players downvoting the game.
That is very easily attainable today. And let's say that this goes on long enough that your game dies because you can't afford it anymore.
Okay.
And your studio has to shut down. At end of life, you now have to release those server binaries to keep the game in a functional, playable state. At which point I take those, I create a private server, and I monetize it. And some people have said, well, simply don't allow monetization of the server. Well, who's going to enforce that? If you want a government initiative to enforce that, that means the government has to build a registry of all of those games and all of that intellectual property that shouldn't be monetized, and then somehow enforce that with no one owning it. Because those
well, there's already a ton of other ways that things are enforced now, right? I mean, obviously, it would take time for the government to do that. Now, should you be able to monetize something or not? I mean, obviously, this already happens. Like, the government already does this. They don't have a registry for it. They just simply have a case where if somebody reports this, they might look into it and then solve the problem. That's really the way it works. If the game is end of life, why not? I also don't really think that, because in the concept of, so like if a person wants to maliciously monetize your game and they do that through destroying your game, couldn't they just already do that if they destroyed the entire company, because you wouldn't have an apparatus to protect the IP after the company was gone? So I think that if you really followed the logic of this all the way through, people could just destroy the entire company instead. No, they can't. Yeah, that's the point. Exactly. Yeah, so I don't really see how this makes sense. It's different if it becomes legal. In what way, right? Yeah, and also, like, I don't think that the company should have to give out server binaries. The company should not have to do anything to, like, aid people in making private servers. It should not have to do a fucking thing. The only thing it should not be able to do is prevent people from making private servers. These are two very different things. Yeah, I am not a fan of this, like, because, yeah, sure, of course.
Studios have shut down. That's going to be a massive burden. On top of that, if you want to go the other route and say the company has to go and control it, well, what if the company's not around anymore?
Yeah, they
Is
can't
that
do
just
it. It's impossible.
Able to be monetized now? Again, this was obtained through abuse of the original creator. I don't think that's a good route. And this scenario gets even worse if you do allow monetization, because now I can just kill off your company and then monetize the server and no one will ever come after me. Now it's even more of a problem. So allowing monetization...
we already have this, like, for example, like, we have this with things like Turtle WoW and, like, Ascension WoW, which both of those games have, like, components to it that are pay to win. And so you have people that are maliciously monetizing online live service games in private servers. It's actually quite common.
Of this work is strictly worse. And for those of you out there that say, oh, this can be done right now, I could just destroy your studio and take your stuff anyway. You could, but this allows a route for it to be legal to do so. That's the problem. After putting this
I don't really think that the legality is something that people view as a problem, because a lot of the people that are doing this are in countries where you can't really enforce anything, like they're in Russia or they're in China or something. So I don't think legality is really an issue at all. That's not really the reason why it doesn't happen.
Out publicly and talking to people about it.
And also, like, I'm fairly certain that, like, putting and setting up a bunch of bots and exploits and trying to ruin a game, like, I know that I think this lawsuit was in Germany, and it was with Blizzard. And Blizzard won the lawsuit against a botting company, I think it was called Glider, because Glider was found to be intentionally and maliciously damaging their game for profit. So, like, that's already illegal. So I don't really see, like, so if the thing that they have to do in order to do the thing that's legal is illegal, if legality was the stopgap that would prevent it from happening, you wouldn't even get through the first step to even get to the second step ever. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't see that happen. I don't.
Scenario on both YouTube and Discord and Reddit and a bunch of other locations. I got a couple of takes back. We're going to start with the most extreme position and kind of go from there. So in the most extreme, people said live service games shouldn't exist at all, and the initiative will kill them off for good, and that's a good thing. Well, you don't get to define what players get to play or not play. You also shouldn't be able to get to...
By the way, absolutely people do. This is not true at all. Like, if you, with a law, you could make a law that says that players cannot play a certain type of game in a certain type of way. This is absolutely true. You can easily do that. There are already laws like that in other countries, and some of them even here.
Define what developers build or don't build. You should not have creative control over the developers, and you should not have control over what is in my Steam library or on my phone. That doesn't make...
We already do. You already do. There are already tons of laws and rules with what's allowed inside of a game and what's not. And also the way that it's allowed. Yeah, it's already been like that. It's been like that forever. He means players, not laws. Yeah, well, how do you think the laws come into pass? It's because people advocate for them. So players collectively can advocate for a law to be put out. The law is put out, and then now it's a rule. Now, is this a good thing? I kind of don't think it is. And I think that you're right. Like, this isn't a good thing that you can tell people what game to play. But I don't really think that live service games are bad. I don't think that a lot of people think that. That's like kind of a pretty, and he even said, right, this is an extreme circumstance. It's not really a, it's not the normal thing.
Any goddamn sense. Aside from that, the initiative does not purport to kill live service games. It would just make it incredibly difficult to build said games and add a lot of risk to it, which is why I'm bringing all of this up and why I don't support the initiative in the first place. A lot of people don't realize that this will slowly diminish live service games in the market because it's not an incentive for us to build them anymore, which means you get less multiplayer live experiences.
I think that's fine. If a live service game, the only way that it can be monetizable and like functional for a company to do is if the company retains the IP rights to it, to controlling what people do, and they own everything inside of that game, even outside of them providing access to the game, then I do think that there are some circumstances where if you put something out to market and it's not existing in a way that is beneficial to the customer, then I don't think that not everything deserves to exist. Just because you want to make a game this way doesn't necessarily mean that you should be able to. We'll get way less games. Well, I don't really see how that's true. I mean, like in like 1995, right? We got a lot of video games. And so like a lot of them just wouldn't be live service. Live service only benefits the dev at that point. Yeah, exactly. Then don't buy the game. I think that don't buy the game. There's a lot of argumentation that you can use to that, but you could use then just don't buy it towards any consumer protection rule. Like, okay, well, this company is taking advantage of the consumers. Okay, well, then just don't buy the product. It's a dismissive argument, and it doesn't really work whenever you actually apply it to like other consumer protections as well.
It sucks. I like live service games. I enjoy playing things like Final Fantasy XIV. I enjoy going and playing in games in the past, at least, like League of Legends. These are games that are live service. They require a live service to run. And you shouldn't be able to take that away from people. And if that's your only position on this, not only are you disingenuous in what the initiative is purporting to...
You're right that the people shouldn't be allowed to take it away from people. But you know who else shouldn't be allowed to take it away from people? The developer. The developer shouldn't be allowed to take it away either. That's the whole conversation. That's the whole point. It's that if you have this game and people paid real money for this game, then they are entitled to something with that money.
Try to achieve, but you're also aggressively attacking other players instead of trying to fix something. So the next one is that this is about games preservation and that it needs to happen to preserve these types of games for future generations and for everyone to always have forever. But I would argue that this isn't actually preserving these games. Social games, such as, let's say, Apex Legends, require a number of players to be in the match at the same time so that you can have an experience that is only able to be obtained through lots of players interacting, right? It's a multiplayer game. You need a bunch of people. How many of you have felt negatively when an MMO dies?
Oh, yeah.
Or when a live service game dies? Oh, dead game. There's only 5 people online. Why would I play that? So why would you want to preserve a game in that state? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to take down these live service games, put them up on a private server, and then play it with a couple of people. You're not bringing it back at its height. You're not taking a snapshot of what the game actually is. You're making it limp on in a way that doesn't make any sense. That's not preservation. And for those that
I think it absolutely is, because if you are keeping the game and it's being preserved, even if one person is playing it, one is still more than 0. Also, like, there's a lot of private servers that are out there that are very popular. Like, you look at, for example, like Nostalrius, right? Blizzard had to shut down Nostalrius because of how popular it was. I don't really think that games preservation has anything to do with, like, the amount of people that are playing the game. I think it has to do with just the simple fact of being able to preserve the ability to play the game. Like, I don't think that a lot of people are playing E.T. on Atari. I would hope nobody is. However, I think it should be preserved for people to play it if they want to.
Stop there and go, but private servers going to have a lot of players. Look at all the ones for World of Warcraft.
Exactly. Great argument.
We talked about that. It opens up a route for abuse of the developers. So that is not a solution. And the last take that I got from this is, and it's the most reasonable to me, this is an initiative.
I don't think that it necessarily opens up a route for abuse. I just don't see that, because if you collectively as a company send bots and exploiters to destroy the community of a video game, I'm like 95% sure the company can sue you for that. Like, it's not even a question. So if legality is the reason why this isn't happening now, but in order for it to happen, you would have to do something that is also illegal, I don't really see how this would work. Like, it's already, they're going to sue you. Yeah, so I don't really see this happening. Ultimate Online Outlands? Yeah, exactly. Thor seems to think most people will be bad actors, at least in this argument. Well, they will. And if you give people the opportunity to be a bad actor, you will get bad actors. This is always the case, and it's always, like, I mean, listen, any guy that's worked at Blizzard knows this, right? If you've played MMOs or you've seen, I mean, even some of the shit that happened at Blizzard itself, very, very problematic, right? So yeah, if people can, then they will. However, that's already happening. So yeah, I don't see that really being an issue.
It's not a law. Why are you upset? Just wait. I'm not going to wait.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm not going to wait is because I see the start of this conversation not making sense. It's not including the actual developer side of the conversation. It's not showing the trials and problems that could arise inside of the gaming industry for people who are actually making the games you play. I don't have any reason to be quiet about that. And many other developers aren't.
I would argue that the existing laws right now are what the developers are in the conversation for. Because the developers and the big companies that have collectively had these laws written in ways that are beneficial towards them, that is their position. It's very obvious what their position is because that's the way the laws are written. Big surprise, guys. Here in the US, a lot of laws are written in the benefit of big companies because big companies influence politicians to write laws some ways. So I think really, and I think also he does bring up a good point with this. He does, that developers do need to be included in the conversation. Absolutely they do. And I think that's the whole, like, this is an important topic. And I think that this topic is much bigger than just video games, too. I think this topic also goes into, like, for example, it goes into, like movies, like software in general. Like, there's a big problem. I think that right now as a culture, we don't really understand what digital ownership should look like. And in my opinion, I think that digital ownership should be the functional same thing as owning something on a CD-ROM. You should, or a DVD. You should have complete autonomy to do what you want with that thing. And the company can't stop you from using the product in a way that's not like cannibalistic toward, like they should not be able to like burn the disc and sell another disc, right? Of course. But other than that, I think you should be able to do whatever you want, right? It's the same thing I used like with Nintendo, including resale. Yes. So actually resale is a great example. I do think that you should be absolutely 100% allowed to resell what you have. It's the same as right to repair. Like all of these laws are not in the benefit of a customer. They are in the benefit of giving the company a monopoly on the way a customer is able to use a product that they've paid their money for. And I think that when you accept somebody's money for something, you then have to give away a certain amount of what you gave them. That's what they're paying money for. And I think that really digital ownership on the internet right now is very confusing because like is digital ownership is something like NFTs? Do we need to move back to using like physical copies? Do things like Steam need to have like local files installed so you can't just lose your whole account? These are really big questions that I think that people don't really know the answer to. And I don't think anybody really knows the answer to this. You have to figure it out. And that's why it's important to involve developers in the conversation as well. I think that he's right. Absolutely. Yeah, but it's up to the companies if they want to sell their games or license them. That's their prerogative. But it's not up to the companies because a license is not real. A license is something that is enforced by a government. So whenever you say it's up to the companies, it's actually not up to the companies. It's up to the government to allow the companies to create something like this and enforce it. Because the company doesn't enforce the license. The government enforces the license. When Nintendo shuts down a Smash Brothers tournament, Nintendo doesn't do it. The government does it because the government says this is real. So no, I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that anything should just be in the company's purview entirely. Then ownership isn't real? Yeah, you're right. You're right. So private property does not exist in a natural state. Like, for example, no animal can own an object, right? Private property, like if you take this into a very big abstract, private property does not exist. The idea that you own something is not real. The only thing that says it's real is the government. If somebody comes over and takes your thing, then, well, you clearly didn't own it. What's protecting you from that? Nothing. So the fact is that, yes, absolutely, that's true. We define what ownership is. We define what a license is. We decide that. That's the reason the government wants to say, oh, well, we're going to steal your money. Here's a great example. Here's how you know this is true. The government says, we are going to steal your money. And if you don't give it to us, we're going to put you in jail. That sounds like stealing, doesn't it? Oh, my God. But they call it taxes, and that's just the way it is. Because the government is what defines what physical, what private ownership is. So because it can define what it is, it also can define what it is not. So no, I don't think that's a good argument at all.
Going to be able to speak on this. As I explained before, it's really easy to lose your job if you're working at a major studio and try to speak out of turn on something like this, especially with something people are so passionate about.
He's right about that.
Doesn't make any sense to stay quiet. And it also doesn't make any sense to wait until it's in a different form when I see that it has so many problems with the language as it is currently written. I should be able to be talking about this. In fact, I should be talking about this. I am a content creator specifically that is a game developer that has worked in this industry for 20 years.
Yeah.
This is my wheelhouse. This is what I do. So for those who are calling for me to just be silent and sit in the corner, no. With all of that,
I don't think anybody wants Thor to be silent, and at least especially I don't. I think this is a really important conversation, and his insight matters a lot. I think these videos are helpful and useful. Even if I disagree with the premises on them, that's what that's the whole point. This is like, yeah, people just disagree on the position. Yeah, but that's fine. A lot of people disagree on positions. That's totally okay. Yeah, they're informative. Yeah, because you want to see things from somebody else's perspective. Absolutely. It's not even a question. No one wanted them to be silent. I think a lot of people express that. And like the problem is that when you have a topic like this that's seen, because like people are calling Thor, people are saying like, oh, well, Thor is just being corporate. He's, he's working for Blizzard. He only cares about developers, etc. And you have a lot of noise that's kind of like, like tribalism, rabble rousing, things like that, right? And so all of this noise makes it harder to have a conversation because it makes it to where like people feel like they're backed into a corner. And he kind of is, yeah, everybody says this, right? But like, again, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is that what is he saying? Is what he's saying accurate? Why is it accurate? Why is it not accurate? And what would be a better improvement on it? Like, I'm not thinking about where he's coming from or anything. This is again, it's like low IQ fucking internet. But what about you did this one thing? You're not thinking about an idea. You're thinking about a person. And in my opinion, I think that is a lower form of thinking. So yes, I don't want him to be silent. I don't think so at all. As a developer, he has a different take than non-developers, but it doesn't make his perspective invalid. No, and it also doesn't make Ross's perspective invalid, or Louis' perspective invalid, or like anybody else's perspective invalid. The fact is that if you buy a product, your perspective on what you do with that product is absolutely valid because you gave them money, and that's a two-way street.
Said, I do think there's a consumer protection thing that we can fix here.
Sure.
It's just not really what the initiative is about. I think that if you're going to buy a live service game, you shouldn't be told you're buying the game. You shouldn't be told that you're purchasing the game. You should be told explicitly that you are purchasing a license to that game. The reason why is because that license needs to be revoked anytime that you are cheating at the game and damaging the play experience of other players.
That's very true, and he's completely right about that. He's absolutely true. But I think this is different than a license because you don't necessarily need to have a license for that. For example, if you are banned from the official server, this is very different than you having a license being revoked. I don't think anybody agrees that a company should have to provide server access to a person who's cheating. Because again, this goes against the person's, like, for me, this is like a... I look at a lot of things based off of that's exactly what a license is. No, a license is your ability to play the game, period, whereas being able to access a server is something individual, unique to that server. So I'll give you an example for that. Elden Ring. So Elden Ring, you can play, on the official servers. And if you do that and you cheat, you get kicked off of the official servers and you get put somewhere else. So I think that it's absolutely fair for them to kick you off of that. That's totally fair. His main argument is that you're not buying the game. Stop hyper-focusing on license. Well, I think that if you're not buying the game, then they shouldn't be charging you money for it. That you shouldn't be able to spend money on it. If you're spending money on something, you are entitled to something. This idea that just because we call it a license means that you have no consumer protections, this seems a little bit unfair, doesn't it? This is a little bit unfair. So no, I don't think so. You own nothing. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this at all. And I think this issue, this is what I said before about live services. You can't own a service. Well, it's not about owning a service. And also, again, this is like going back to what I was saying, is that when you define something as a service, that doesn't necessarily make it a service. So, for example, like Adobe Photoshop or something like that. Why is it that you can't just buy Photoshop and then use it indefinitely? It's because Adobe says that you can't do that. How is that good for anybody else except for Adobe? That's ridiculous. Why do we allow people to do that? Why is this a rule? It's insane. So why are we allowing this to happen? Yeah, they just want recurring payments. Exactly. So this is the problem, is that licenses exist because they are beneficial for the what do you call it? They're beneficial for the actual developer or publisher, not because they're beneficial for the customer. And what I'm saying is that the laws that currently exist is what the companies want, because the companies are the ones that are influencing the laws. It should go both ways. Yeah, it absolutely should go both ways. My opinion, it should be required by law to state in advertisement what you're buying is a service or a digital product. I think that really, like, I could go back to what I said about this from the very beginning, that the only thing that I kind of feel strongly about with this is that after a game goes end of service, if somebody else wants to recreate that game of their own means, I don't think that the company should be able to shut it down. Everything else is kind of up for debate. Like, this is all kind of like an opinion, and I'm not really like 100% sure on all of this. But I do think that, for example, and another thing is that I don't think that a place like Nintendo should be able to shut down tournaments. I think that if you play a video game and you buy a video game, you should be able to run a tournament for that game with no restrictions. I don't think that a company should have that right to stop you from doing it. It's your product. Why? Because you paid money for it and it's yours, and you should have the autonomy to do what you want with what you buy. It's very simple. A lot of people like to intellectualize, like buying like intellectual property and buying, all these things. But fundamentally, all this intellectualization, it ultimately comes down to you can't do something with something that you paid money for. Is there a good reason for that? No. What about free-to-play games like Riot's games? I don't think that they should have to provide a server for it. They could just not do it. Yeah, for sure. Does it get a little more gray area when you can make money from the game, though? Yeah, it does get a little bit more gray, for sure. I'm actually waiting for someone to provide me with a legit reason as to why Nintendo should be able to shut down tournaments. Yeah, because there isn't one. You bought the game. You own the game. That's it. It's period. Like, that there's nothing more to it. It's a total overreach over corporate power. Yeah, exactly. Massive overreach.
This is written in the TOS and the EULA.
Their argument is to control brand image. They don't have the right to suppress people's free expression in the pursuit of protecting their brand image. You don't have that right. Like, you gave that right away when you sold the product. Your brand image is not more important than my consumer rights.
Usually not clearly defined at point of sale. Or they throw a giant TOS in front of you and it doesn't really do anything because people skip past it. If at point of sale it says specifically, there's specific language stating that you are either...
Not in Japan. Japan can't do anything in America. Japan doesn't shut anything down. Japan sends, like... If Japan... Like, you realize we have different laws than Japan right now? Like, Japan doesn't enforce certain laws here because they can't. That's not how it works. Like, I'm not talking about in Japan. That's not my problem. I don't live in Japan.
Or purchasing a license or anything along those lines that you're not actually buying the game directly. I think it would go a long way to informing consumers of what they're doing and protect them from some of these business practices that they didn't realize they were engaging in. That makes a lot more sense to me than force all developers to leave the game in a functional, playable state. And that's about it. That's all I really wanted to talk about with this. I hope that's clarified some things for some of you and some of the dangers that this can cause as it is currently written. If you're still mad about this, not much I can do about it. Outside of that, I'm going to be gone for the next 4 days, so if you expect me to respond or anything like that and you think I'm ducking the issue or hiding in some way, I'm not. I'm just in Vegas because there's DEF CON going on, which is a hacking convention, and it's the first vacation I've had in 5 years. I can't wait to see my friends out there. So with that in mind, see y'all later.
Well, good for him. Yeah, so anyway, that's pretty much the way that I see it. I think that a lot of people were not even really mad about Thor's take on this. Like, as I said before, I don't really have a super strong like position on a lot of like the more nuanced issues with like the software, but I think it's mainly about end of service and end of life for games and how people can use them after that. And so yeah, that's at least my perspective on it, right? He's leaving no notes. Yeah, for sure, right? Normalized personal vacation. Yeah, of course. Why is he dodging the guy talking about it? Grub here. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that the reason why people are mad at him is because of the language that he used talking about the original thing and the fact that he didn't want to talk to Ross. I think that's the reason why they're mad at him. I'm not saying that they're right. I think that, like, you shouldn't have to talk to anybody about this. Ridiculous. But, like, all I'm saying is that I don't think that a lot of people thought that he was entirely wrong. They just thought that he approached it in a way that was dismissive. So yeah, that's the way at least I see it. That's the way I interpreted it. Yeah, it came off as condescending. I think that's what people didn't like. Yeah, exactly. And so disgusting. Right. And like, to me, like, maybe this is the same with, and I bet this is probably the same with Ross too. Like, all of us, as far as I know, are all men in their 30s that have been on the internet their whole life. There is nothing at all that's going to, like, offend me by the way that somebody talks about something that I'm saying, right? Like, I didn't even, like, I saw him say that, and it didn't even register to me that it was problematic. I was just like, okay, so he doesn't want to do it? Okay. Yeah, I didn't even think about it. But yeah, I could see where other people would get annoyed. Sure. How many signatures did the petition get? I don't know. It's not going to get 1 million, though. I hope it gets a lot. I hope it's, like, again, and the petition is a starting point for a conversation, not the end point of it. But yeah, that's basically where I think about it. That's how I think about it. Again, I think Thor brings up some good points. I think the developer should be involved in this conversation. And I feel like that would be beneficial for everybody. So yeah, that's the way that I see it. And I also think that when a person buys something, you can't just redefine their ownership as something that is beneficial to you and then expect it to be enforced legally. I think that's unfair. So yeah, you're wrong on the game tournament issue. Not saying that I disagree, but games are protected under the same copyright as movies. You can't buy a Blu-ray and start your own movie theater with it. Games and music are also protected with this. There's more too. So you're saying that, like, you can't show a Blu-ray? Well, I would argue that that's not really true, because you can also... So what you're looking at is transformative content, and whether that transformative content is acting as a market replacement to the initial product. So I don't agree with you that movies, like buying movies and then doing your own movie theater, is the same thing, because the movie theater is acting as a market replacement of you buying the movie. So the difference with Smash Brothers Melee is that a tournament is different than playing the game or owning the game yourself. And it's a fundamentally different experience. So I see what you're saying, and I think that's a good point, but I don't think that it's applicable to a tournament. I think a better argument for movies would be that you can't buy movies and then start a review site talking about the movies, because the reviews are an evaluation or like a form of usage of the product that is separate and not a market replacement for the product itself. So I don't agree with you. It's not legally different. The legality of things doesn't really matter to me. Like, I don't care what the legal rules are for anything. Yeah, that's totally irrelevant to me. Why would I care about that? Just change the law. Yeah, why would I care about that? Yeah, what if, if the law, like, okay, just change it then. It's easy. Legal, yeah, something being legal doesn't make it right. Now, you have to follow the law. You always follow the law. Don't be like, oh, well, I don't believe in this. I shit. And then you just go and do whatever you want. No, of course you can't do that. Absolutely not. However, that doesn't mean you can't work towards a change over time. And that's, I think, that's what the petition was trying to do.